Podcast.
I'm April Morley.
And I'm Tom Pacello, the ROI guy.
This podcast is a service of the Enterprise Value Collective, a community for business value-focused leaders and practitioners, and sponsored by our value consultancy, Genius Drive.
Our mission with the Enterprise Value Collective and with Genius Drive is to help accelerate and optimize the value articulation in each of your customer engagements and throughout your customer lifecycle. We are here with our coffee, dirty chai. I've got my Gators mug for you, April, and with our guest from Finlistics. You saw the logo on the mug, Dr. Stephen Timme. Welcome.
Hi, Tom. Hi, April. And hello, all my value coffee friends out there.
Awesome. Stephen is the founder and CEO of customer value intelligence firm Finlistics. At least that's how I like to refer to your firm.
I
And
like it.
also the author of the book on value, Insight-Led Selling. And we'll provide a link in the speaker notes to for you to get a download of the book and to order your own. So, Stephen, what I want to dive into today is a
Hey,
topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts. And that is this concept that there's a value gap between buyers and sellers. So, whenever there's a gap, you got to look at kind of both perspectives. So, I want to start with the buy perspective. Like, what does a buyer want from sellers and solution providers today?
yeah, April and Tom, I think one of the executives I interviewed in the book, Steve Clancy, who's the CIO at Georgia Pacific, and we asked him, what do you want? And I'm going to read this. And he said, bring me something fresh from the outside, something I don't know. And that was a repeated theme. Tell me something I don't know. Show me that you've only not only identified one of my problems, but you have a fresh solution that you've implemented somewhere else and will work for me. So it's really about tell me something I don't know, bring me something fresh. And so from the book, there was three things if you kind of netted it out with these executive ones. It was like one, tell me something I don't know. The second thing was show me the business and financial value of your solutions, feature function. I didn't hear anyone say, I just wish they would show me more features and functions. Not a single person. Uh, and then the third one was make my life easier. And what they meant by that was they said, these solution providers, enterprise sellers bring me these really cool things, but I got to socialize this, right? And I'm the one that's got to take their 30-slide presentation deck and boil it down to one page. They said, don't make me do your work, but those are really the three things. It's all about bring me value, and bring me some more value.
Yeah, Stephen, so right. Gartner had a similar results from a survey
Hmm.
they gave, which is show me that you understand my business. And like you said, have some fresh insight about it from all the experience you've got from all your customers. They're expecting that insight. Make sure that you're communicating the value and the outcomes and showing that I can improve those. And then finally, the last one relates very much to what you said as well, which is confidence. Give me confidence that if I go and do this, that it's going to be successful because it's risky otherwise.
Exactly. Agree completely.
So, how well do you think sellers are meeting these buyers' needs?
April, I'm a very positive person. I used to teach at the university, so be a professor of finance. So you really had to be positive, right? But I'm just going to net it out. They're doing a terrible job. I mean, you can talk to executives. I think the one study said 80% of executives think that buyers don't understand their business. We do research, and so April, we did this one, and we asked, how well does your sales force know your customer? About 20% said, hey, we consider ourselves trusted advisors, we're partners. That's great. Around 50% said, well, look, even when we know their goals and strategies, we don't know how our solutions align. So how could you have a value discussion? I'm a
Hmm.
retailer. I want to grow the revenues by having a differentiated omni-channel experience. Okay, there's the goal and strategy. I don't know how I can help you. And then 30% said they still focus on features and functions. So I don't see how they sell anything. So April, just to net it out again, and I hate being negative, I hate for my friends out there, but a terrible, terrible job. And what we find, we've done different research, and even though most sales organizations talk about customer first, outside in, I mean, all the typical phrases, we find that only about 25% really are, walking the walk, talking the talk. So that's the bad news. To me, though, the good news is, hey, you're not one of the 25%. What if you became that? What would be the revenue benefits to your organization? So the bad news is doing a terrible job. The good news is, and you can look at all kinds of stats about retention and growth and all those things. If you get it right, pretty good rewards.
Stephen, I know no one likes to get a report card like that back, but the research is there. And like you said, you
It
have the
is.
research. If we look at Gartner research, research from Forrester, it all aligns to sellers are perceived as falling short. And not only falling short, but that the gap seems to be widening, um, which is a big challenge because we've spent a lot when you add up all of the amount that's gone into sales training over these past, let's say, 3 years, and sales enablement and the platforms and everything else that goes with it. Yet customers are reporting that they're less satisfied with sellers
Yes.
and their purchases today than ever before. Why is that? Why is it growing?
Well, I think it's a couple of things, and we all know the stats is that, the buyers are what, 70% down the buying journey. The millennials feel very comfortable getting information, and some don't even want to talk to sellers. So one, the bar has been raised, right? And the second thing, in fact, I did a webinar with Tom Castley and Janice Gordon a few months ago. It's called Customers Have Shifted Gears. Are you still in the race? And of course, someone brought up, well, EV vehicles don't have gears. I'm like, oh, shut up. Anyway, so anyway, no, what's happened is the bar has been raised, rightfully so. Sales organizations, if you look at what they're doing now versus what they did 5 years ago, Tom and April, listen to QBRs.
Hmm.
Most QBRs are the same. Okay, how much are we going to close? I look at QBRs, I look at account plans. You're like, well, where's about the customer and their goals and their strategies and what they're trying to get done? And so it's the customers really have shifted gears, and a lot of these organizations have not changed, and therefore that gap has gotten wider.
I completely agree with that. I think you highlight two big points that the customer is part of the challenge in this expanding gap. Their expectations have elevated, but I also think that they call on sellers and they call on solution providers very tactically, and then they wonder why they get tactical engagements as a result. So they're asking for the demo, they're asking for the tactical information, maybe because they couldn't rely on anything strategic or anything like that before. But I think that customer expectations are elevated, but they're also asking for the almost the old type of engagement with sellers. And then you mentioned a big point, which is executives and the role that they play in this. If we're managing the business to that quarter and to closing of deals as opposed to how much value can we deliver to our customers and more of a long game with those customers as opposed to the short term, we're only as good as the last
Yeah.
quarter. I think we've got a challenge in overcoming this and closing the gap.
Well, and that's what Tom Castley, one thing I love what he, instead of saying sales leaders, he said they got to be coaching leaders. And April and Tom, you all know what's happening is, okay, I'm a sales leader. I used to have like three, maybe four people reporting into me. I now have 10. I don't have time for coaching.
Mhm.
So I'm not saying it's an easy answer, but there's a lot of reasons. But I know I'm very fortunate to get to talk to a lot of executive buyers, and they're just like, yeah, I may ask them for some technical information, but other than that, but what's I've seen though, Tom, is in April is a trend where these organizations are now specifying these high growth teams that are being very, very proactive, going to customers, not because of an RFP, not the usual this, but I mean they're going to be very, very proactive in terms of, hey, we saw this, we think we can do this, we think it's worth this. Let's talk about the strategy in doing that. And they're calling at very high levels. This is not like a director level, VP level. They're like, if we can't talk to the very top or close to it, then let's go somewhere else. So that's something I've seen just the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations are putting together a task force to be really strategic with their largest customers. Though it's so important to really scale it across the entire sales organization. And, as you mentioned, it's a lot about coaching, it's a lot about training and enablement. And we've seen a lot of investment into sales training and enablement. So you'd think the value gap would be getting smaller, but the opposite is it's growing. So why do you think that is?
Well, we talked about the customer, the bar's been raised, people are doing things the same old way. And even with sales enablement, and I have a lot of friends in sales enablement, but it's a lot of it is it's kind of the same old, right? Hey,
Hmm.
let's do a 2 day webinar, let's do this, let's do that, which used to be a great source of revenue for Finlistics. So I'm not, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but the more enlightened companies are going more towards the action-based learning,
Hmm.
because if you sit through, 1 day webinar, I forget the stat, like, a month later, a week later, you only remember like 20%, and that's probably the jokes the facilitator told. So anyway, no, so I just think the way it's being it needs to be repackaged about, okay, April, what are you doing today? Well, I need to I got to go call on a senior marketing person. Okay, well, here's how you go do that, right? Or I need to find some prospects in this space, and these are the ways that we can help them. Oh, okay, well, here's how you do that. So more and more of the organizations I'm seeing are breaking into the smaller pieces, very, very action based, doing more sharing. We always talk about the role of the sales leader, the role of sales enablement. Well, guess what? Field sellers have got a role too to play. Like, hey, what's working, what's not working. So I'm seeing that gap closing some, but the same old way just doesn't work anymore. In fact, at next month, Siobhan Thatcher at Salesforce, myself, we're going to be talking about how do you create this customer first culture, and a lot of it's going involves not doing it the old ways. That doesn't work anymore.
I think expectations need to change so that we're not so quarterly driven. So we have that more strategic approach because value does require a little bit of patience. I think the way that we educate our sellers needs to change for the modern seller and the modern learning patterns. I do think that there's fuel that needs to be provided. And when a seller's going out to speak to a buyer, they need to be armed with the story that's going to resonate with that persona. They need to be armed with the financials so that they can
Right.
have an educated discussion with them. And if we're just arming them with standard data sheets and standard presentations and product demos, it doesn't cut it. Talk about the importance of fuel in evolving these conversations and closing the gap.
Yeah, yeah, and so a couple of things. One, it has to be part of the culture, right? But that's beyond the scope of the of, of this coffee session, value coffee. So a couple of things. One, people ask me all the time, where do we get started? I mean, oh my God! I mean, I said, look, here's the deal. Go and find out what are the most common goals within an industry. Pick your top two industries. What are the most common goals? Okay, we are trying to expand profit margins by optimizing processes. Oh, okay, good. Now let's break that down to smaller pieces. Well, who all could you talk to? Well, you could talk to production, distribution, logistics, all kinds of different people, and then come up with a how story, Tom. You and I are finance folks, right? You're the ROI guy. I'm Dr. Finance. And people always expect us to immediately say, well, go to the ROI. No, no. So I always tell folks, pick a couple of industries, pick a couple of the more common goals, and then come up with the how story. Oh, how can I help you expand margins if you are in production? Right? To get the how story down. Well, how can we help them reduce labor costs? How can we help them reduce overhead? Where have we done this in other organizations? So, I think a lot of times people want to jump ahead to the value piece. And I think you and I have talked about this. You don't have the right to start talking to me about ROI until you've convinced me that you're aligned with what I'm trying to get done. And then secondly, you've got a good story. So I always tell people to start there and then later get into the value part. right? So I
The
always
detailed
like,
quantification, the business case.
yeah,
But I think
exactly. And there's a lot more
people
to
hear
it.
value, Stephen, unfortunately, they think, oh, business case. And that's not really what we're talking about.
No.
Values everything in the
Mhm.
customer engagement. And a lot of it is, as you said, earning the right where they know you understand their business, you understand their industry before you get into the business case and the numbers crunching.
Yeah, and I mean, because there's the emotional value, right? I got the emotional value and I've got the financial value, and the emotional value may be, I'm in production. I'm tired of these, unplanned machine downtimes. I'm getting calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. My CFO is beating the you know what out of me. So part of the emotional value would be, wow, this is great. Things are operating smoothly. I can maybe get a good night's sleep. I can maybe spend a little bit more time with my family. And then we get into the ROI piece. So a big part of this is really coming up with the how. How do we help, but not some generic, hey, we can help you reduce cost. Oh, okay, well, that's really exciting. The other piece, which Tom and April, I find get often left out, is the voice of the customer. I was in a session where we were doing this, value mapping, solution mapping, whatever you want to call it. And they were all talking about how our solution adds value to the customer. And I said, hey, look, just a crazy thought here. Has anyone talked to the customers about how the value they see from what you
Mhm.
guys are selling? And so they said, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea." And they went and they said, "Look, you guys just make things smoother. You just, I mean, yeah, there's the financial return, but the greatest value that I place on your solution, it works all the time. It makes my life easier. We don't have idle labor." And so it was great because then they start talking more about those benefits as well as the financial benefits.
It's the emotion, the logic, and the trust that you do have to get across.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's a terrific point in asking the customer what the value is they're receiving.
I know, April, isn't that a unique idea? Ask the
Revolutionary.
customer.
So, what's the one piece of advice you'd like to leave our enterprise value collective with today?
It's really define your North Star. What is it you're trying to get done, right? Is it closure rates are low, pipeline isn't big enough, whatever it might be, but it's really what are you trying to get done? And then how do you communicate that with folks? Because a lot of times I find there's this disconnect between here's what the CEO is telling the markets and here's what sales enablement sales is doing. So, and I'm not saying the kumbaya, all that kind of stuff, but what is it we really are trying to get done? And then how are we going to measure that? Right? Is it going to be some of the typical sales statistics? Is it going to be, hey, I'm now calling not the director level, but I'm calling much higher up. I'm actually building relationships. One of my favorite examples is a company that went through this, and so this one, she ran one of their practices, one of their industries, and she called me up one day. I was all happy, and we had gotten to be friends. And I said, "So, Jill, what's going on?" She goes, "I had the CEO of a retail company call me and ask me about an acquisition. Not that he wanted to buy more stuff from her, he just respected her." So my point being is, what's the North Star? And there's all kinds of different measures, and one of them has got to be, I'm calling at a higher level. They look at me as truly a partner, trusted advisor, whatever you want to call it. And so that's when you're going to really start winning to have those longer term relationships.
Fantastic advice. Thanks so much for joining us, Stephen, sharing your insights and experience. And thank you to our listeners for joining in on the Value Coffee Talk podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
April, Tom,
Oh,
go ahead,
thank you,
Tom.
Stephen. No, thank you. Thank you so much. Talking
Yeah,
about the
thanks
value
for
gap is always a pleasure with you, and your advice is always well heeded.
Well, thank you so much. And again, for all the Value Coffee listeners out there, hope this was some time well spent. And any questions, please reach out.
Excellent. We'll include the link to access Stephen's book, Insight Led Selling. So keep an eye out for that. Please, there's the book. Please sign up for the Enterprise Value Collective on LinkedIn or on our geniusdrive.com website. This will enable you to stay in touch with us on the latest events, podcasts, tools, insights. And until next time, our Enterprise Value Collective, keep sharing and growing together.